The Arctic convoys of World War II were ocean-going convoys which sailed from the United Kingdom, Iceland, and North America to northern ports in the Soviet Union, primarily Arkhangelsk, Archangel, and Murmansk in Russia. There were 78 convoys between August 1941 and May 1945, sailing via several seas of the Atlantic and Arctic Oceans, with 2 gaps with no sailings between July and September 1942, and March and November 1943. About 1,400 merchant ships delivered essential supplies to the Soviet Union under the Anglo-Soviet Agreement and U.S. Lend-Lease program, escorted by ships of the Royal Navy, Royal Canadian Navy, and the U.S. Navy. 85 merchant vessels and 16 Royal Navy warships, 2 cruisers, 6 destroyers, 8 other escort ships, were lost. Nazi Germany's Kriegsmarine lost a number of vessels including 1 battleship, 3 destroyers, 30 U-boats, and many aircraft. The convoys demonstrated the Allies' commitment to helping the Soviet Union, prior to the opening of a second front, and tied up a substantial part of Germany's naval and air forces. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the USSR. The following month, Britain and the Soviet Union formed an alliance, the Anglo-Soviet Agreement. Britain was quick to provide limited materiel aid to the USSR beginning in August, including tanks and aircraft, in order to try to keep her new ally in the war against the Axis powers. One major conduit for supplies was through Iran. The 2 nations began a joint occupation of Iran in late August, to neutralize German influence. The Soviet Union joined the Second Inter-Allied meeting in London in September. The USSR thereafter became one of the big 3 allies of World War II along with Britain and, from December, the United States, fighting against the Axis powers. The American Lend-Lease program was signed into law in March 1941, which provided Britain and the Soviet Union with war materiel beginning in October. The British Commonwealth and, to a lesser extent, the Soviet Union reciprocated with a smaller reverse Lend-Lease program. After the first convoy, codenamed Operation Dervish in August 1941, the Arctic convoys ran in 2 series. The first series, PQ, outbound, and QP, homebound, ran from September 1941 to September 1942. These convoys ran twice monthly, with interruptions in the summer of 1942, when the series was suspended after the disaster of convoy PQ-17, and again in the autumn after the final convoy of the series, convoy PQ-18, because of the long daylight hours and the preparations for November 1942's Operation Torch. The second series of convoys, JW, outbound, and RA, homebound, ran from December 1942 until the end of the war, though with interruptions in the summer of 1943 and again in the summer of 1944. The convoys ran from Iceland, usually off of Alfjordr, and traveled north of Jan Mayen Island to Arkhangelsk when the ice permitted in the summer months, shifting south as the pack ice increased and terminating at Murmansk. From February 1942 they assembled and sailed from Loch Ewe in Scotland. Outbound and homebound convoys were planned to run simultaneously. A close escort accompanied the merchant ships to port, remaining to make the subsequent return trip, whilst a covering force of heavy surface units was also provided to guard against sorties by ships such as Tirpitz. Escorts would accompany the outbound convoy to a crossover point, meeting and then conducting the homebound convoy back, while the close escort finished the voyage with its charges.